The Last of Us is back again with the second season, and we're already off to a good start with the first episode, introducing us to a whole new stage in the infection with the Stalker that attacked Ellie. Even though the game has managed to put us across a wide variety of stages and infected forms, the show somehow gives a little bit more insight into it. There's a certain order to this evolutionary trait of the infection, which can be seen very clearly once you go through all the different kinds of monstrous beings that appear in the Last of Us universe. Let's explore the evolutionary trait of the Cordyceps infection and the various stages of the disease in the Last of Us. Don't forget to wash your hands before watching this before you eat, because you never know what virus you might be carrying. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The Cordyceps curse, the science of the infection. Before there were the runners or the clickers that have become an important part of the Last of Us universe, there was simply a fungus that managed to wreak havoc. Cordyceps unilaterus, a real-world parasitic fungus, was the primary source of inspiration for the infection that led to the outbreak in The Last of Us. To understand this fungus, we will go to Dr. Newman, who appeared in the pilot episode of the HBO series. According to him, the ancient fungus doesn't aim to kill its host, but seeks to control the host. For example, in the case of an ant, the fungus travels through the circulatory system to the ant's brain and then floods it with hallucinogens, bending its mind to its will. So in a way, the fungus can now puppeteer the ant's behavior, from the motor movements to various other actions. Since the fungus needs food to survive, it starts eating the host from within and eventually starts replacing the ant with more of its flesh. But it really doesn't let the victim die. Even though this fungal infection is very real, it cannot possibly spread to humans because of the antibodies present in our bodies. But according to Dr. Newman, fungi cannot survive if its host's internal temperature is over 94 degrees. And currently, there are no reasons for fungi to evolve to be able to withstand higher temperatures. But what if that were to change? What if, for instance, the world were to get slightly warmer? Well, now there is reason to evolve. One gene mutates, and an Ascomycete, Candida, ergot, Cordyceps, Aspergillus, any one of them could become capable of burrowing into our brains and taking control not of millions of us, but billions of us. Billions of puppets with poisoned minds, permanently fixed on one unifying goal: to spread the infection to every last human alive by any means necessary. And there are no treatments for this, no preventatives, no cures. They don't exist. It's not even possible to make them. And by 2003, this scenario became real as global warming allowed for the critical threshold of 94 degrees Fahrenheit to be crossed, and the fungal infection managed to cross the species barrier. After claiming the first victim, the disease spread like wildfire, and thus began the journey of the evolution of the Cordyceps fungus. But it was not just about evolution. It was merely a means to survive, and thus came the different stages of this process. According to Neil Druckmann, one of the minds behind The Last of Us, in the first game, there is all this documentation about the different stages of the infection. Now we have to justify why there are different stages. Why are there mutations of these things? Without getting into it here, there's something about the environment and how much time has passed that has allowed these mutations to occur. So let's jump into the journey of the Cordyceps fungal infection, and remember, the masks aren't very helpful here. Stage 1. Runner. The fall of human mind. Imagine you are just walking back home one fine day, and it's the late afternoon, and you have headphones on and are sipping on something. It's almost as if the day is settling down, so you feel a bit calmer than earlier. But suddenly, a figure appeared, fast, shambling, clothes torn, and red smeared all over the mouth. You hardly get a chance to figure things out before it ends, lunging at you and biting you. Still, you manage to shove it off with your heart pounding. You think you're okay. And maybe you are if you are known as Ellie, but perhaps you are not. Within 2 days, sometimes even less than that, the Cordyceps brain infection starts the terrifying process of metamorphosis. slowly killing you. The host keeping you a human shifts into the very first stage of the process. You've reached the first stage of the infection, and you are now the runner. It might sound like some poetic name of the infected stage, but it's just a clear indication of what the infected does at this stage. It runs, sprints, and that's the most horrifying thing about them, because you'll think that this is the rotting part, and yet the dead has just started into a sprinting stage and is hurling towards you maniacally. But interestingly, they are still you. In a completely unrecognizable manner, they are still you. The fungus hasn't yet broken through the skin in the grotesque manner that it will eventually, and while the flesh has already mottled and bruised, paled with lesions and thinning hair, there's still some resemblance to a normal person. Even the clothing is still intact, with bits of tears here and there due to some sort of panic or violent activity. If you look at the eyes, you might get a chance to witness the human fighting to get back as the eyes are blinking. The mouth feels like some wriggling activity is going on inside as the slender tendrils thread through the lips, acting like roots fighting to look for sunlight. But the most tragic thing about this state is that it's almost as if the runner's mind hasn't been entirely taken over yet, and hence, the human might still be alive somewhere. Sometimes one can witness the runner crying while charging at someone, as if they're completely broken about their condition. Others might hesitate even to attack, almost shrieking in fear for themselves instead of anger towards the target. One time, a female runner was seen weeping over a body that she had just mutilated, and the moans were feral. That's probably one of the most haunting aspects at this stage of the infected, as the human inside is just a viewer witnessing the fungus slowly cutting the cords and taking the wheel. Even after all that, the runner might be the least scary of the infected stages because they're merely a teaser of what's coming next in the stages of the infection. And even then, it might not be helpful to underestimate them because they hunt in packs. They are fast, and if you come across a group of more than one, then you might be asking for a death sentence. Putting them down is easy. You can use a single bullet or your bare fist to dispatch them. Often, using bullets for a lone runner might be considered amateur work. Even if you consider them ineffective, there have been cases where they've proven more dangerous than expected. During the events of The Last of Us Left Behind, a rather eerily silent runner ended up stalking Ellie, as if it were trying to study her, and appeared to be methodically patient. Maybe it was just transitioning to the next stage. But then in the HBO series, Joel encountered one such runner bolting at him with a staggering speed, almost appearing supernatural somehow. But compared to most other zombies at this stage, the runner might be the weakest, even when acting in groups. The creepiness of an almost human being might be the only thing that can creep someone out. Stage 2. Stalker Between Worlds. Maybe you survived the events of the last bite somehow, perhaps you didn't even get bitten somehow. But now you've gone deeper into what might be called the Cordyceps City, as the veins and tendrils of the fungus have taken over anything visible. You're probably hungry, and you enter a deserted supermarket. After a while, you come to terms with the creepy aspect of the present scenario as you realize that everything seems awfully silent. And just then, something shifts in the corner of your eye. A shadow that appears to be moving or disappearing right before you can even look at it. You might freeze with fear as this hidden stranger starts observing you planning your next move, waiting for you to do something so that it can take its chance to make a move. You have just witnessed the second stage of the infected, the Stalker. A runner generally takes about 2 weeks to a year to transition into a stalker as the fungus attempts to make more brutal and striking changes to the external part of the infected's body. Chunks of skin will just fall off and tear away and be replaced by mushroom-like growths that can push out of the eye sockets and the cheekbones. Sometimes, the only part of the face that the infection manages to retain is one of the eyes, which track the movement of the target. But still, it doesn't depend entirely on its vision. To track the movement, it appears that the stalker manages to develop some sort of echolocation, almost like an early version of sonar that will be useful in the future stages of the infected. But in the case of the stalker, it's nearly completely quiet, not giving the prey a single chance to discover their presence. In the Season 2 premiere of HBO's The Last of Us, Ellie and Dina go into a supermarket, only for Ellie to crash through the floor below through a crack. Once there, Ellie assumes that there's no threat because of the absence of typical typical sounds that the runner or even the later stages of the infected are known to produce. But the sudden quiet and Ellie being there all alone is something that triggers a fear, and suddenly, unseen by Ellie, something seems to be skittering along the edges of the shelves. Surprisingly, there's no charging from this stranger, and it manages to hide itself from Ellie and observes her movements as if waiting for her to be distracted. Right when it finds the perfect moment, it pounces at her, and with a spider-like movement, it manages to put her down and then bite her in a brutal and quick attack. Things might have been over for anyone else, and Ellie doesn't understand. And that's why she later reports back the peculiarity of this infection stage. She states that it didn't run at me. It did what we do, took cover, planned, waited, lured me in. In a way, she did manage to coin the name Stalker for them in the series. The stealth becomes the trap for an individual as they study whatever minor movement they've been able to catch. And just when they try to sneak up on it, it disappears and only appears when the person is vulnerable. Almost as if waiting for the prey to panic and using that as the opportunity to attack them. Even the attack is brutal enough to knock someone down because the stalkers hit with a strong force and completely shake you up because of the suddenness of the entire ordeal. In The Last of Us Part 2, the stalkers had become much more intelligent, coordinated, and often attacked in pairs, taking some spaces that might make one feel they are in control. For example, they could primarily be found in abandoned apartments, forest clearings, or the subway tunnels of Seattle, making it almost appear like a game of chess with the human becoming the pawn. But even scarier than that is when you think that the stalker is dead, as it appears to be attached to a wall, as if it's just a corpse that the building and the tendrils of the fungus have now claimed. In reality, it's not, and the cordyceps have actually put it into dormancy with the tendrils climbing the wall and spores pulsating quietly, waiting for the target to get closer. When the human is near enough, the shutters crack and the stalker breaks free of the fungal shell and suddenly bursts into attack mode with full sound and rage. Some might never break free, but there's a chance that they are just waiting. Yep, that might just give you goosebumps. The original The Last of Us game had only a few of these stalkers, but they were strong enough to leave an impact on the human they targeted. One of the best moments was the hotel basement in Pittsburgh, the flooded sewers where these stalkers were waiting in corners or the narrow corridors. In contrast to the runners who go around in packs, the stalkers are almost placed deliberately so as not to overwhelm the human, but haunt and confuse them with the slightest of warnings that you are in their territory. But who can forget that one time when Abby faced a version that appeared to be a combination of the stalker and some of the other infected stages in The Last of Us Part 2? Firearms are the best option to deal with them, but then there are flamethrowers, not to give them a chance to close in on you. Unless you are Ellie, who managed to knock one of them out with merely a switchblade after stunning them with a brick, you might have a difficult time dealing with them. Stage 3, Clicker, the sound of evolution. So you made it past a stalker, but that doesn't mean you're away from danger, because you might be hearing a strange sound. As you walk through the dark and eerie hallway, you might hear a rapid and eerie clicking sound that echoes through the silence. It might sound unsettling, like the gnashing of teeth, but somehow it also feels hollow at the same time. As the sound comes closer, you freeze. But then you see a figure appear, utterly grotesque and hardly having a single bit of human feature apparent apart from the shape of the figure. Whatever was human about this figure has been completely erased, and it has now gone to the third stage of the infection, the clicker. It takes roughly a year for an individual to reach this state after a prolonged exposure to the fungus, and by this time, any bit of their humanity has completely gone. Anything that used to be a recognizable human feature is now covered by layers and layers of thick fungal growth, turning it into a nightmarish creature with nature's design. What used to be the face is now split open with only some jagged teeth visible, and the eyes are completely enveloped by the fungus, making the clicker completely blind. But don't be fooled by the physical appearance of their blindness, because they've developed a form of echolocation, traits of which were visible with the stalker to survive. The clicking sound you hear when in their presence is the sound they emit to navigate their environment and locate their prey. It might not seem like the best solution for the blind, but it's enough to make them a threat. With a further metamorphosis of the body in the presence of the progressing cordyceps infection, the human tissue is broken down and replaced by a strong fungal armor. The head becomes completely covered with fungal plates, providing sufficient protection to the brain that is no longer human. All this fungal armor development is not to give some sort of defense. Still, it's instead a crucial part of the clicker's survival because a gunshot to the head might have put down a runner or a stalker, but a clicker will take more than that to be put down because the gunshot will just do some minor chipping to the fungal growth and leave the brain unharmed. If you face a clicker, you must first remember that they are blind and use that to your benefit. Since echolocation is only triggered by movement or sound, there's a good chance of making it through their presence using stealth as the primary means of movement. So, moving around them might be possible if you can distract them by using a bottle or a brick to lure them away from your path. But once you get caught by a clicker, you have triggered their berserk mode, and then they'll start flailing their arms around, growl like crazy, and look for you after having detected your presence. Fighting it out at close distances might be impossible, so it's better to deal with them using powerful range weapons like a shotgun or a Molotov cocktail to take them down from a distance. You might be forced to use something like a shiv or a bat, primarily a melee weapon, to take them down. But avoiding such a situation is recommended. The smallest mistake while near them can lead to instant death. While the clickers were busy giving us nightmares with their extremely detailed design and horrifying behavior, these factors have also made them quite popular. They have been featured most prominently in both the games and the HBO series. Their first appearance in the second episode of the series was unforgettable because the clicking sound was one of the most menacing things to hear. It does manage to trigger the irks. This unsettling being has appeared in other media, with different games and other shows referencing it for its unforgettable presence. In Life is Strange, you can see Sean Diaz make a joke about clickers by mimicking the clicking noise to scare his brother. The clickers also appeared in Minecraft in a pixelated format for some of the game modes. Even Dying Light had an Easter egg that featured a zombie with a head resembling the clicker. But the clickers have done enough in both the games and the series to keep us on the lookout for them. One of the earliest and memorable appearances in The Last of Us Part 1 was in the abandoned hotel, where Joel and Ellie had to sneak past through them, and it had to be one of the most tense situations from the game. The game had to even change the means of dealing with the clickers with new mechanics, like pushing them away or using a switchblade for an efficient stealth kill being introduced. However much the mechanics might have been developed, it's quite clear that the players had to be more strategic in dealing with them. So remember, even though you have a clear chance of making it past the clickers, there might be circumstances where you might have to prepare yourself for the worst when the time comes. Stage 4, Bloater, Fungal Fortress. Things are getting a lot more sophisticated, and as you continue your journey through the cordyceps infection-affected remnants of what used to be your town, you start hearing a lot more noises than mere clicks. A growl could be heard in the distance, and right when you listen to it, you realize that you might be expecting something much more gruesome than your past few interactions. You keep a lookout for the noise, and slowly the sound starts becoming a lot more guttural and almost sounds like a rumble. And right when you think you found where it's coming from, you discover some movement. But even before you work out the movement, you smell the disgusting fungal rot that fills the air. And then it appears as a wall of fungus and flesh, and the body glows at certain places faintly with growths and blisters like armor. Yep, it's the worst possible thing you could imagine. The fourth stage, the bloater. The cordyceps infections haven't just overtaken the body by now, but have managed to engulf it. It has metamorphosized into a towering, grotesque beast filled with armor and rage. Anything that was faintly human about this being, from the clothing to the bits of anatomy, has completely disintegrated, and the fungus has calcified into thick plates. Some of these impenetrable shells also have bioluminescence. While the clickers had some cracked bits of the crusted plates here and there, the fungal layer layers of the bloaters are a lot more functional and literally act like armor plating for the infected being. If you're concerned about vision, then you must note that they have a further evolution of their echolocation ability, and this time around, the sound they produce is a lot more crude and muffled. In fact, this time around, you might feel them even before hearing them because of the deep guttural sound that they produce when they're about to charge. Even though the bloaters are extremely aggressive, they are slow, making their movements much more predictable. Sounds kinda easy to deal with, doesn't it? You are wrong, because unlike the other stages of the infection, they don't bite you or try to claw you. Instead, they just rip jaws apart or smash skulls and sometimes twist the necks till the spine gives in and shatters into a million pieces. What's the save? Nothing. No knives, no guns. Once they grab you, you are done. If you think dealing with them from a distance might be a good idea, you're wrong again, because they have these swollen sacs of mycotoxin all over their body, like the lower abdomen, the upper chest, and the back. Once threatened, they will rip these off and hurl them at you, and on impact, these sacs will burst into clouds of toxic spores that will end up searing and choking you. So, if it isn't death by being ripped apart or crushed, it's basically death by suffocation as your health continues to bleed away in the presence of the toxic spores. So basically, there's a chance that there's no way around dealing with the bloaters, but they aren't unbeatable. Your best options for weapons include a Molotov cocktail and a flamethrower. Just set them ablaze and wait for them to thrash and roar as their armor starts blackening and cracking up. But that isn't the end, because they can continue with their thrashing, and thus you have to use the shotgun to finish the job. Or even a nail bomb or some armor-piercing round from a hunting rifle. Or El Diablo will also work. But don't even think about using a brick or a bottle to stun them, because that will work completely against you. There's a chance of using melee against them, like Joel did when he used a machete to hack a bloater to death, but avoiding such a scenario is preferable. The bloaters become some of the most horrifying opponents to deal with because most of the time it's clear death if you come across them. If Joel faces one, then it can rip off his gas mask and then crush him to death. And similarly, in the case of Ellie, it can kill her with a single punch. So yeah, it's not surprising that they don't make a killable appearance apart from the cutscenes in the game, and they don't appear at all in the Left Behind DLC. Who can forget the times when Ellie had to face the bloater in the Jackson Hotel, and even when Joel had to face a bloater in a rather claustrophobic area in the Wyoming Hotel. So on a final note, you can run from a runner, you can outsmart a stalker, and you can also sneak past a clicker. But a bloater, you have to battle against the bloater, or you might just be dead in a matter of seconds. Whatever happens, don't let a bloater get a hold of you. Divergence 1. Shambler. Toxic mutation. Now, unlike the last time, you've entered a dilapidated neighborhood with pouring rain, and the buildings around you have half collapsed and are soaked with years of decay. You've experienced quite a few stages, so you prefer to remain stealthy with your movements, and that makes sense because there's a chance some other stage might just be around. The air is thick with humidity, and it almost feels like things are getting heavier with every breath. Out of nowhere, you hear the sound of squelching and wet shuffling behind you. And right when you think about looking around and reacting to the sound, a hulking figure emerges from behind you, and there you have the Shambler. While it might seem like there's some difference in this stage of infection with the bloater, it's still the 4th stage. These creatures, or whatever you might call them, are a terrifying sight with their large, swollen bodies filled with fungal growths. The pustules seem to be throbbing and often spew toxic and acidic gases whenever they sense some sort of danger. It might feel as if the movements are sluggish at first, but once triggered, they might charge at you at a rather surprising speed, completely throwing you off guard. With each and every level of the metamorphoses that takes place, the Shambler might be the most horrific outcome of this process. As Druckmann has stated, the Shambler is a result of environmental factors, like too much exposure to water, which strongly impacts its mutation path. Even though the bloaters are the more commonly visible counterpart of this stage, they are found in the drier regions, and the Shamblers are, in turn, a result of the wetter and humid environments. If there's constant rain or some sort of coastal flooding, the infection will result in a Shambler, with the fungus adapting in its twisted way. The bodies are filled with pus-filled sores that release acid whenever they're threatened, and the gaping gaping mouth and other aspects of their appearance become the hallmarks of a shambler. But one can never forget their ability to turn their body into a weapon by spraying toxic spores and causing massive damage. While almost every aspect is similar to a bloater, the shambler seems slightly less powerful and less resilient than the bloater. Even though their attacks, particularly the acid attack, can make them difficult to ignore, they might be sluggish at first until provoked, in which case they can burst into a sprint. Like the bloaters, the best case scenario would be to avoid being grabbed by the shambler because you can consider yourself dead once that's done. With the acid attack being something they use whenever provoked, it's best to maintain your distance and stick to fire-based weaponry. Either a flamethrower or a Molotov cocktail can cause sufficient damage from a safe distance, but at the same time, you can use mines or some sort of pipe bomb to blow them to bits completely. Another interesting thing to note about them is that it's quite rare for them to appear alone, so they mostly occur in groups, and thus the acid attack becomes a lot more dangerous in this group formation. The best way to deal with them in such a situation would be to lead them to a confined space and then use some sort of explosive device to thin the horde. The Shamblers didn't have a strong impact like the others in the Last of Us lore. Still, it's important to note that they had just appeared as a rumor in the series until an army chanced upon them, and ever since then, they've ended up being a rather memorable enemy in the series. The idea that nature played a role in the evolution or the metamorphosis of the infection was clearly explained with the Shambler. Thus, they became proof of the devastating power of the Cordyceps infection. So, as I said, maintain your distance and fire if you're in doubt. Fire! Divergence 2. Rat King, the Infection Godfather. Now, it's better if you don't imagine yourself in a situation where you encounter the next stage of the infection. So we will stick to the case of Abby, as she goes through the crumbling ruins of the Seattle hospital as a horror beyond the comprehension of any survivor awaits her there. She's walking into a tomb that is guarding evolution itself, as it has 25 years of rot, sealed pores, and some of the very first victims of the Cordyceps brain infection. But it would be preferable if you don't happen across such a behemoth. The Rat King, because facing this stage is like facing the very personification of the worst that the virus can do. The Rat King is the 5th stage of the Cordyceps infections, and it can be labeled as a superorganism that took decades to fuse, and proximity, moisture, and unchecked fungal growth to reach this stage. It's almost as if this monster isn't a being in itself, but a combination of many, including the clickers, the stalkers, and at least one bloater, that have been merged together to become a grotesque, pulsating, and unstoppable mass. The name might be referencing the real-world phenomenon of rats being entangled by their tails, but this is way worse than that when one puts it into their imagination or merely witnesses them. The fungus binds them together as it twists and warps around the separate beings and combines them into a single organism capable of destruction on an unimaginable scale. And the size is merely a hint towards the damage it can do, because it doesn't take any damage upon itself while breaking through walls and ambulances. So the general means of attacking that managed to put down the infected in the previous stages merely do not affect the Rat King. The existence of something like the Rat King is one of the most terrifying questions about the extent to which the metamorphosis of a Cordyceps fungus can go. Even though it's unclear how they were formed, the presence in the Seattle hospital indicates that beings that are a part of its formation are the first infected patients who had been sealed off and left to rot. After years and years of rotting, they didn't die, resulting in something beyond the previously set limits of the fungus. It almost feels as if this stage wasn't a planned growth. Instead, it was a byproduct of the containment failure. So, in a way, we can understand that under the right circumstances, the Cordyceps have the horrifying potential to grow and finally compound together, resulting in a wholly new apex predator. Earlier, there was a horizontal growth pattern with the virus, as we could see traits of stalkers in the runners. Similarly, the shamblers and the bloaters had some characteristics that could be observed in the clicker. But at this stage, there's no capacity for the horizontal mutation anymore, and the result of being put in such extreme conditions results in something that isn't just the usual horrifying, but it's a mythical level of horror. The Rat King isn't isn't blind, quiet, or even predictable like the other stages, but it's all of them. And even then, something more, becoming the worst-case scenario of the Cordyceps infection. Now, let's get into something that shouldn't even be pondered upon once you get a chance to witness a rat king. How do we fight this behemoth? The rat king appears strong, tearing through everything in its path. As you continue to put every bit of your artillery into this creature, be it the bullets, the fire, or the bombs, you witness some sort of disintegration in action as the pieces begin to fall off the monster.